today we are going to show you how to make our family recipe for meatballs.
Yay!
Now, it's been a secret up until today, but today we thought we would share it with you of how our family makes meatballs. Now, here's the thing about meatballs. Every Italian family has their own way of doing it. It's almost as unique as your thumbprints and your fingerprints. Everyone has their own recipe. So I'm not saying ours is the right way. I'm just saying it is our way. Right, Gia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wait, before we get started, wash those hands.
Clean hands are a must for making meatballs. You have to have clean hands, and our hands are super clean right now. Okay, so we're gonna start with our sauce, and I know you can't see it because we don't have a videographer with us, but over on our stove over here, I have a giant pot that has olive oil heating up in it, okay? And the first thing I'm gonna add to that olive oil is onions. Now, you're probably like, why are those onions orange? That's because I grated them in my food processor to save time. And I also grated carrots in there, and I did the carrots first, and so it turned the onions orange. And it's okay because they're all going to the same place. So Gia's gonna go over and add those to our pot for us to get it going. Can't have meatballs without sauce, and we call it sauce. I know there's controversial gravy sauce. We just call it sauce. So Gia, go ahead and put those onions in there for us. Just be careful and don't let the oil splatter on you. Safety first when cooking, guys. We thought we'd show you this today because I feel like everyone needs a go-to recipe in their back pocket for when you have last-minute dinner parties thrown on you. You need a go-to that you know will always turn out. And our meatballs, those are our go-to. All right, I'm gonna go help Gia really quickly. Gia, you come back over here. Tell them how you feel about meatballs, and I'll get these in there.
I love meatballs.
Gia, are these one of our go-to recipes?
Yeah, we have them a lot.
Because we're Italian, right?
Yes.
And Italians eat meatballs.
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. Okay, so we've added our onions, and we're gonna sweat those out a little bit, and then we're gonna add our carrots to it. And you're probably like, carrots and tomato sauce? But carrots balance the acidity that comes in the tomatoes that we use. You know, our sauce, we don't want it to be sweet, right? Like dessert, but we also don't want it to be too acidity either. So, acidic, excuse me. So we add carrots to give it some sweetness. And every tomato is different, so it's really about tasting your tomatoes and seeing how much sweetness you need to add to it. So we start with just carrots to see if that gives us the right amount. So I'm gonna go add our carrots.
Are you going to tell them how much or something?
Yeah. Okay. All right, sorry guys. Okay. So Gia just said, are you gonna tell them how much of stuff? And yes, I'm sorry. I use about 1 onion, and I always get a sweet yellow onion. That's what we put in there. And I used about 4 carrots today. They were big sized carrots. And again, I just peeled them and I put them in my food processor. And I put quite a bit of olive oil in the bottom of my pan because the olive oil has such great flavor and it adds to the sauce. So I probably put about 1/4 of a cup of olive oil in there. All right, we're ready while that's sweating to start our meatballs. All right, Gia.
Yes.
So in our bowl right here, we have 2 pounds of ground pork and 2 pounds of ground beef. Now, ground pork is not always the easiest thing to find in the grocery store. So sometimes we will buy pork tenderloins and grind them ourselves in the food processor, and it turns out great. Now, pork tenderloins are a little more lean, so when I use pork tenderloins, I tend to get a fattier beef. But since I cheated and I bought pre-ground pork, and it has a little bit of a higher fat content, so I used a little bit of a leaner beef. So I used about a 90-10 in here today. But there's 2 pounds of each of those things, and that's how we start, okay? Sometimes we add ground veal, sometimes we don't, just depending on what you can find. Right now we were lucky to find meat at all, so we're happy to have this. Okay, so we're gonna start with that. The next thing, which sounds a little crazy, we use fresh breadcrumbs in our meatballs. I typically like to buy a loaf of ciabatta bread at the grocery store and grind it in my food processor as well. Couldn't find ciabatta, but I found this great Italian loaf. It looked like this before I chunked it up. And I just used this bread right here. And I put it in my food processor and I ground it into breadcrumbs. Now, I need to add some moisture to those breadcrumbs. So today I'm gonna use heavy cream because it's what I have. Normally I like to use evaporated milk. I don't know, it's just a good stable product to use and we use it all the time. So Gia's gonna mix those up for me with a fork and try to let those soak for just a minute while we add the other things to our meatball mixture. Okay, so meatballs, obviously, you gotta have some Parmesan cheese. So I use a lot of Parmesan cheese and use some freshly grated Parmesan. Don't use the powdered canned stuff, okay? That's not Parmesan cheese. Get a real Parmesan cheese, okay? The better cheese you use, the better your sauce is gonna turn out. So this is some freshly grated Parm. So I'm gonna put in, probably a cup and a half
I'm making that
full of Parmesan cheese. As you can see, it's a lot. It's a lot of Parmesan cheese, but that's important. Okay, Gia has mixed up our breadcrumbs and they're still a little dry. So I'm gonna add just a little more milk to them to make sure that they are nice and add some moisture to our meatballs.
Now this is actually milk, not heavy cream, right?
This is heavy cream stuff. I know, anything you add heavy cream to just makes it a little bit better. But again, we typically use evaporated milk. Don't have any right now, so we're just improvising, and I happen to have heavy cream, so that's what we're gonna use. And go ahead and stir that around a little more. Half and half will work. Regular vitamin D milk will work. Whatever you've got, just a gentle, just like mix it up like this. That'll keep it from spilling everywhere. Okay, go ahead, do that. So she's gonna get those ready, and while she's mixing that, I'm gonna go check on my onions and my carrots. Give them a stir. We don't want anything to burn. Burning is bad. Okay.
Are we having these for dinner?
Yeah. All right, so those look great. We're not quite ready to add the sauce yet, as our mess maker over here is making the meatballs. Okay, this looks pretty good now. As you can see, it's not runny, but we've added some nice moisture to those breadcrumbs because, again, it's gonna help keep our meatball mixture nice and moist. Okay, so we're gonna let those sit for just another second. Gia's gonna scramble up. I have 3 eggs, and Gia's gonna scramble those up for us. There's a fork. Scramble those up. Good job. Gia's my sous chef, but one day Gia is gonna be her own chef, and she will probably be featured on the Food Network.
Or not.
So keep an eye out for her.
Don't.
She's a very good little cook. She likes to cook and help out anytime she can, so which we're grateful for. Okay, that's perfect.
Okay.
So she has mixed up, you need to stir that in the sink. She has mixed up our eggs for us, beaten our eggs a little bit for us, all right? And we're gonna add those to our meatball mixture. And now we're gonna add some garlic. Now, this is important. We use fresh garlic in our meatballs. Now, back when we had the restaurant, we did not use fresh garlic, we used roasted garlic. And let me clarify, this is not the Paterno's restaurant meatball. That was a different meatball that was invented by our chefs. This is our family meatball, so it's a little bit different. But we use fresh garlic. And what we did with this garlic, I used probably, what, 5, 6 cloves?
I do not like garlic.
Yeah, she doesn't like garlic, but can't even taste it. It just adds so much good flavor to our meatballs. So I used about 6 cloves of garlic, and I crushed them and I diced them super finely. And what I did is I added salt to it, a good amount of salt. This is actually the only salt I'm gonna add to the meatballs for right now. And by putting the salt on the garlic, it kind of made them into a paste, and I kind of scraped it and chop, 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 and scraped and chop, 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 until I got this really nice texture, which I have here, which is a salty garlic paste. And we're gonna add that to our meatball mixture, which will add some yumminess to it as well. Okay. Now, we're gonna take our breadcrumbs. They've been soaking just a couple of minutes while we've been on here, and they look good. They seem to have a good texture to them, you think? You think they need a little more moisture? Yeah. Or do you think they look good? You think they look good? Yeah. Okay. Gia says they're good, so we're going with it. So we're gonna add, I'm gonna hold back and not use all of this It probably is about 1.5 cups, I would say, ish. You know Italian cooks, they can never tell you exact. They're like, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. This is where clean hands come into play, guys, because we are going to use our hands and mix this mixture up, okay? So, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, try to keep it in the bowl. So Gia's going to mix, and I'm going to go check on our carrots again and onions.
When I was little, I would never want to touch raw meat, remember?
Yep.
I'd be like, ew.
Okay, our sauce looks good, so I'm ready to add the tomato part to our sauce. Now, this is what I buy, this is what I use. I don't care what brand it is. This happens to be this brand. I have a mixture over here. I have some organic that I bought at Whole Foods, just a combination. But I add, it depends on how much sauce I'm making, but today I'm adding like 6 cans like this to our pot for our sauce because we're gonna make quite a bit. We're gonna freeze these meatballs and we're gonna eat some tonight and then freeze some for later and maybe share some with families. I'm gonna pour these into our sauce while Gia is mixing away.
This is the best part. It's cold.
Good job, Gia. Keep mixing. You wanna make sure you get all those flavors. You don't want a giant bite of meatball that has all the garlic or all the cheese in it. So you really need to make sure that your mixture is well mixed, but not over mixed, because when you over mix it, it can make the meatballs a little tough.
Yes.
So we don't want to over mix the meatballs.
That was my sister.
All right, so I'm getting all my sauce in this pan over here. I'm gonna give it a stir, and I'll tell you what else I add to the sauce. It's a very simple sauce, guys. Anyone can make this recipe. The whole recipe is simple. It's time consuming, but it's simple. Okay, giving my sauce a stir. Now, for right now, the only other thing I'm gonna add to my sauce are some dried Italian seasoning. I've got about 2 tablespoons in here of dried Italian seasoning, and I'm gonna add that to my sauce as well. Now, later, I'm gonna taste my sauce, and if it seems too acidic and bitter, I'm actually gonna add a little honey. I'm not gonna add sugar, but I'm gonna add a little honey to try to balance it. Again, we don't want it to be sweet, we just want it to be balanced, okay? So I'm gonna add my dried herbs, and I'm gonna give those a nice stir. And the sauce is good to go. I probably will need to add some salt to it a little later, and again, I'll test to see how acidic the tomatoes were, to see if I do need to add any honey to balance my sauce. Again, that's very controversial. I probably have some Italians out there going, no, no, but it's okay, I promise you. All right, you want me to take over for a minute?
No.
All right, make sure you're scooping the bottom. All right, so getting that all together is super important. We want it well mixed. Yep, see, there's a little thing. Can I do it for just 1 second and then I'll let you back in there? All right, might want to get it off your hands for a minute. Okay, we probably needed a bigger bowl, but we're making use of what we have right now. Okay, so as you can see, I want to make sure that the beef and the pork get nice and mixed together, so when you're eating them, you can't tell what you're biting into. It's just one nice homogeneous mixture of ingredients that taste super yummy together.
Can I take over?
Hold on, let me get it one more time, then I'm gonna let you take over. I just see a bunch of pork in the bottom, and I wanna make sure that it is all incorporated, okay? Whoops, that's okay. All right, again, we probably should have used a bigger bowl, but we wanted to use a clear bowl so you could see our mixture. So that is what we've got here. All right, I'm gonna wash my hands. Gia's gonna mix that a little more. All right. Now this recipe, this is how my mom has been making meatballs forever, and I learned from my mom. And my mom, anyone who knows my mom, she's a really good cook. So we kind of aspire
But I'm the best.
to be as good of a cook as my mom. All right, so after we get these meatballs mixed together, we're gonna start rolling them out. And as we roll our meatballs out, we're gonna roll them into some dried breadcrumbs. So normally I would just buy some seasoned breadcrumbs, some Italian seasoned breadcrumbs from the grocery store. I didn't have any today, but what I did have is I had some onions, some seasoned croutons, and this is a trick my mom taught me. And I just threw the croutons in the food processor and turned them into breadcrumbs. And they smell great. Don't those smell good? Lots of flavor. And so they're gonna add a lot of flavor to our meatballs. All right, what do you think? Are we all mixed?
Yep.
Looking good?
Yep.
Let's check. See if there's any lumps of anything. Okay, good job, G. All right, so now we're gonna roll meatballs, and this could take a while. So we're gonna speed things up for you here. I'm gonna take, you can make them as big as you want. When I usually start, they're nice and small and uniform, and then I get tired of rolling meatballs, and the last one ends up to be about a 4-pound meatball because I'm over it. But what I'm gonna do is we're gonna gently roll our meatball, and then I'm gonna roll it into the dried breadcrumbs, and I'm gonna set them up like nice soldiers on our sheet pan. Now, after we get all of these rolled and put on the sheet pan, I'm actually gonna bake my meatballs. Now, you can do this on the stovetop as well and fry them in a pan, and that's the way we used to do it. We used to brown them and get them nice and crisp on in the pan, and then throw them in the sauce. So we've gotten lazy in our old age, and we found that throwing them in the oven really works just as well. They may not get as crispy as they do in the pan, but when time is of essence and you've sat there frying meatballs for 2 hours and you're over it, you find a better way. So we have our oven preheated to 350 degrees, right? So start rolling, chick. Put them on your sheet pan.
This size?
Yep, any size is fine. Just trying to make them all the same size, whatever size you make them, so that they cook evenly in the oven. So we are, like I said, we've got our oven set at 375, and we're gonna bake them for about 15 to 20 minutes. We have a meat thermometer, and go ahead, put them on your sheet pan over there to make it easier. And we wanna make sure, I try to get these to about, they do have pork in them. I try to get them to about 150 degrees, and then I'm gonna throw them into the sauce. And they are gonna simmer in the sauce for hours, right? The longer, the better. The longer they're in the sauce, the better it's gonna flavor the sauce. Okay, that's good, you're good. You're making a mess here.
Yay.
Look, G, just roll it into a ball, toss it in the crumbs, and put it on the sheet pan. Make sure you have a nice meatball rolled though before you put it in the breadcrumbs. We don't wanna incorporate any more breadcrumb into our meatball. We just want to put it on the outside of our meatball. That's not a good meatball. Roll, roll. She's learning. One day she'll have it. But just a nice gentle roll. Nope, you're not rolling. It's not Play-Doh, it's meatball. And then throw it in there, okay? You want it to be a nice ball. Tender, but you want it to stick together, all right? It's gotta stay together. Okay,
Yeah.
so we would bore you to death if we sat here and rolled all of these meatballs together. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna post a part 2 to this video after we get them all rolled and baked, and then we'll be able to show you what they look like in the sauce as they simmer all day, like hours. Just make sure that you have your pan on a very low simmer. A lot of pots, I'm using this giant cast iron enamel pot, and you wanna make sure that it doesn't have a hot spot in the bottom, because you don't want your sauce to burn on the bottom, because if it does, it could affect the entire taste, and all this work you've done could go to waste because it's gonna taste just like it's burnt, the whole pot. So be careful, stir it occasionally, and get it on the lowest simmer that you can. These meatballs, they freeze really, really well. You can put them in a Ziploc baggie. Any freezer safe material will be great. And they'll hold up for a couple of months in the freezer. They're great to pull out for a last minute dinner. You can use these meatballs. Gosh, you can make sandwiches, right? We like meatball hoagies. You can slice them and put them on pizza.
Ones.
You can use them over any pasta. So they're just a really good thing to have in your freezer. Worth the extra effort to make them. Worth the mess. We have a mess, and that's okay. It's totally worth it. So yeah, so we're just gonna keep rolling, and we're gonna throw them into the oven, and we'll show you what we've got when we get there, right? So bye for now, right? So see you later.
Bye.
Thanks for watching.
See you next
Check for
video.
part 2.